Slow. There. Oh, stop. The third picture from the top. It's a little, that one there. Click on it. All right. That is, what is it, 7 heads?
So it says 90 snakes. Maybe these are all little tiny snakes in the, I can't really tell.
Well, what that is a reptilian demon. All right. It was the image, what I saw back in Laos that was trying to manifest itself. That was what was at that temple. And it's a reptilian. If you ever watch the old movie Jason and the Argonauts, and Jason is going to get the golden fleece, but he's got to fight a hybrid, a dragon. Well, that's the best that I can make of all this, is that it's some type of a reptilian hybrid, some type of a snake. It never did take physical form. It was just showing the outline in a dark, smoke-like shape. Is the first. That was the beginning of the paranormal activity. All right, let me go back to the 506th Air Cavalry. Well, when prior, like I said, the radar down in Daylat, didn't pick it up, but one of the flights that they had going over towards Cambodia, they find this, they see the plane, and they sent me down there to try to make out what's going on, because it was a paranormal event. And because I had training in paranormal activity, they really didn't have. See, Project Blue Book shut down in December of 1969. That's when Project Blue Book shut down. And Project Blue Book was primarily within the United States. Okay. And so you have some guys that are from Area 51, they're wandering around in Vietnam, and I just happen to be one of them, and just happen to be in that area. And that's where they had all the scientists and physicists that was at Dalat. So they were utilizing me for that period there. And they had a few years prior. You have to remember 2 UFOs sunk a patrol boat down towards the DMZ zone, and it went out around the Tiger Island, and it attacked a New Zealand patrol boat, Coast Guard boat called the Hobart. I happened to have been on the Hobart, and I had experience with the green ghost. There's a legend about the green ghost on the Hobart, but what that was basically an entity that had on some cloaking device. They could camouflage themselves, the Hobart there. So yeah, you're right up in there. That's the boat that was sunk. Well, it wasn't sunk. It was badly damaged around the Tiger Island. We had, like I said, paranormal activity in Vietnam, and nobody really did that kind of stuff. But me being from Area 51, I'm just in the area. So But let me get back, and I want to get off on the Hobart here. But that's one of the cases that I was involved in. So getting back to the to this aircraft, I find the bodies. They're strapped in the plane, upside down, DC-3, DC-4. And they have no skin. They have, their skin has literally been pulled off of their bodies. You can see their muscles. And being that they were upside down, the plane was upside down, when I looked on the roof where I was standing, on the inside of the roof, there should have been blood that should have dripped down and gotten on the roof there. There was no blood in the plane, James. There was not one drop. They were skint alive. And so at this point, I'm aware of what the shaman had said, that they had found. Sometimes they would find their men with no skin. So I'm still perplexed. I didn't know the temple was back there. I'm over 1,000 miles from, well over 1,000 from Longtring.
So you're at Angkor Wat right now?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
You were at Angkor Wat at this point.
Well, the firefight actually broke out between the lake and the temple down in the that little slough there. So tiger attacks. There are quite a few people's been taken down by tiger. A 400-pound striped tiger would eat you alive. But while we were trying to get back to our initial point, the radio went off, and it's the 506, and they said, and we were the nearest ones to them. They're very frightened. They're very scared, and there's a creature. They're observing a creature. Okay, they thought they were going to go in there to hunt down the Khmer Rouge, and instead they've encountered a creature. So me and the other guy, we're on foot. It's going to take us a day or two to get up there, and you could do 30 miles a day if you're in good shape, just walking. So we get up, we eventually get around the lake, and we get to where the 506 are bedded down, and they gave the binoculars to the officer that I was with, and then he handed it to me, and when I looked through the binoculars, I saw a bunch of bodies. They had what had happened. The Khmer Rouge has all been killed. Their bodies are cut up. The legs were cut off at each joint. The arms were cut. All the torsos were in a neat pile. They had the heads in a neat pile. You had mixtures of soldiers, and they also had some blacks. So I think it might have gotten a hold of possibly a stray black GI. But what was happening, there were these barrels, and it had to have come from the Khmer Rouge because they were military barrels that had, you could take the lid off and it had a band on it. And they were, what I saw some little grays, and they were, and I also saw some humanoids. And these humanoids, they looked like midgets at first. You could mistake them for a midget, but they looked like they were Caucasian midgets, but they had on a strange helmet, and they had on some type of body armor, like you would put on a flak jacket, you know, to repel shrapnel, you know. Well, they had something similar, but it wasn't as thick as what we had. And what these creatures were doing, they were collecting the body parts. They had dissected your body. Hands in one pile, ankles on another pile. Just every joint that you could be in is what was cut. And the cuts were not bloody. They were cauterized, like a laser cut. Similar to what you might see, like the cattle mutilation that has occurred in the states here. It seemed to be dissecting the bodies, and they were taking the body parts and putting them into drums. And anyway, you at different angles you can see different things because it's a jungle. You know what I mean? Like, then you could have somebody from one side could see a part of it, and you could be in another part of the jungle and you could see the other part of it. It just, we all had different angles. But what I saw was a spear, kind of a spear-shaped spacecraft, and it had, I want to say it had 4 legs. Some people stated there was 3 legs to the craft, but what I saw was 4 landing legs. And it was a spear, and that was the spacecraft was in my sight. So what happened when the order was gave to open up fire on them, and I don't know who fired first, but they had the 506 open up fire on them. This is right after we got there, and there was a firefight that occurred, and one of the humanoids was shot in the head, and it was killed. But between the helmet and the neck area, there was no protection. But if you had shot with the suits on, if you could take a high-powered slug and you could shoot them in the torso, and it didn't phase them. Okay, our weapons were useless against the suits they had on. But what happened is startled the creatures, and a firefight broke out. Some of the creatures came out with weapons, and they were firing their weapons, and the 506 they were firing was returning the fire to the enemy. And they grabbed the humanoid that had went down, and they pulled him back onto the craft. And then I heard a humming noise, and it lifted up, I would say about 60, 70 feet in the air. And what I'm seeing electrical discharge similar to the Tesla coil. If you ever seen the Tesla coils, they give off like an electrical. It's not like, it's kind of like lightning, but it's giving off lightning bolts. And the lightning bolts are changing color. Some of the lightning bolts were green, and then it would change to red, and then back to yellow. And then it was just sitting there, it was humming, and it let out some type of an audio alarm. It was a high pitch, an acoustic weapon. And And immediately everybody dropped, or at least I know I dropped my weapon, and I covered my ears. It was the most painful event I ever had. It hurt my ears real bad, and if you had encountered it, you would fall. If it had landed in a football stadium with 10,000 people in it, and that audio alarm was to go off, you've seen 10,000 people fall to the ground. It was that kind of intense pain. And so once it let out this audio alarm, it went from a circular, the craft was circular like a spear. It turned into what I saw was like a diamond shape. And I'm thinking that was the force field, that when it put the force field on, I could see the spear turn into a diamond. And it was a very, very intense light. And it's kind of like a prism, that if the sun hits it, it sends light off in different angles. And this thing descended into the air, and it went off. Okay, well, by the time that it left, it took us a few minutes. It took me at least a few minutes before I could get up, and I was real sick. I was nauseous. I was like vomiting, real disoriented. Okay, it took me a while to get up, and I'm puking, and my ears are hurting. I'm still, it's ringing. I can't hear anything for the ring in my ears. But eventually I was able to get up and get to the other members of the 506. And, the bodies and the containers were left behind. Okay, when this craft took off, the kangaroos, their bodies were left behind. And everybody shook up pretty bad. You're thinking you're fighting the enemy, and you're not fighting the enemy. So, after we got organized, I told me and the other officer were talking, and it was determined that since the parachute was about a few days south of me, somebody needed to go back out there and try to, find if, the individual from that parachute, could have survived the jump and may have been trying to walk out of the jungle. So might have been injured. May have gotten out of the jungle. But, that was kind of, like I said, my first thought, a tiger might have got him. But the other officer said, well, maybe he's still alive. Maybe, he's injured and he's trying to walk out.
Jimmy, did you go by the name of Rambo at this point?
No, I went by the name of Dutch. If you watch the movie, when Arnold Schwarzenegger, he uses the name Dutch. Well, I was using that name Dutch at that time. But getting back, it was determined that I was going to go back down the river and try to locate this diplomat that might be injured and walking, and if all else fails, I was going to build a raft, get into the river and travel at night, because you can travel, nobody can see at night, down the river. And if it did start to rain, the river, it takes a while for the river to build up speed, you know. But eventually, you know, I would float back down the Tony Sap River to the Mekong River, and then from there, just, you know, come on back down through Cambodia back up into Vietnam. And even if I was out in the river, you know, they would just see me by helicopter or by plane. So when I was on my way back, you know, to the parachute, I, you know, left the parachute, the abandoned parachute, and I went back towards the river, and there was a Viet Cong trail. Apparently, you know, there's been trails back there for hundreds of years, and where people walk back and forth. Well, I thought, well, maybe the guy had gotten on one of the Viet Cong trails, and since it ran parallel to the river and I can hear the river, you know, as long as I can hear the river, I'm not going to get lost. So I was going to go ahead and walk the Viet Cong trail and really document it. We need to know where these trails lead to, which this was a trail they were using when they came down into Vietnam. There's a highway there now. I think it's, let me see if I can get the name of the highway. It may be Highway 6 or Highway 7. It's one of those, but it runs parallel to the river. That used to be a Viet Cong trail. But anyway, when I was walking south, I might have been going for about a day or two. And the jungle is a very noisy place. There's all kind of.
How many people were with you in your group?
I'm by myself at that point.
Okay.
Okay. The other officer, other paranormal officer, has gone back with the 506. It was determined that I would just head south and walk a ways and try to pick up the trail of this this government official. And I'm not frightened of the jungle. I mean I know the worst thing that can happen is a tiger. And because the monsoon's coming, even the animals know to get out of there. You know what I mean? The animals sense the river. So everything's backing up. It's just deserted back there. But when I was walking down the Viet Cong trail, I found a body. And it was one of the Khmer Rouge rebels. And his head had been taken off, and it was cauterized. And I'm very perplexed, you know, about this because of, you know, what I had seen back on the other side of Tony Sap Lake. Those bodies were cauterized as well. But what was unusual, his rifle was twisted. Now, you know, everybody knows you could take a rifle and lay it on the street and run a tank over it. You know, you can mutilate a rifle that way. You could also take a rifle and put it in a vise and take a monkey wrench and twist it. And when I looked at the rifle, I'm looking for if you put it in a vise, there's grips on that vise would leave a checkered pattern. There's no checkered pattern on it, but it's like if you took your hand and put on a bottle, and you took your other hand and put it on the top and was going to twist off the top from a bottle, from a drink. His rifle was twisted. I had never seen a rifle twisted. And it took a great amount of strength to do that. And I'm perplexed. How did his rifle get twisted? So what I did, he had ammunition on him. I'm not going to leave any ammunition behind for the Viet Cong. So I took the belts of ammunition off of his body. And took it with me and went ahead and left, going south. But the further, I went on a ways, I might have been about towards later that night. I stopped to take a drink out of my canteen. There's no noise in the jungle.
Quick question: did the creature heat up the rifle?
No, it was bent by force. He took it and twisted it like you would twist a cap off of a plastic bottle. The barrel was twisted. All right. But what happened, getting back, when I stopped to take a drink of water, there's no noise. And I'm very perplexed. I never encountered that. There's no noise, there's no birds, there's no nothing. The jungle is quiet. And, me being psychic, I thought, well, maybe there is a tiger that a young tiger back there that just, don't know that it's time to leave the area. So I'm still thinking, it's a tiger that's back there. The creatures had already left, several days earlier. So I went ahead and bedded down, found a tree, and back then you don't need a tent. What you do is just find a tree and lean up against it and go to sleep. And the only thing I need is about 2 hours of rest. I was trained. The government says, you only need about 2 hours of sleep to function. So I went ahead and went to sleep. And I got up the next morning and, started moving further south. Still quiet. I got another 20 or 30 miles, stopped to get a drink of water from my canteen. And when I was drinking my water, I was looking around, just kind of scanning around. And I seen a branch that had been freshly broken up in a tree. I think the branch might have been about 6, maybe 7 inches in diameter. And it was broken. It was a fresh break. So I got to looking at it. It's getting towards sundown again. And I thought I saw something. It was a little blurry. And I was just kind of looking at it, trying to figure out, the tree didn't look right. And then I seen its eyes. It was kind of lit up. I could see what appeared to be some eyes, and I could see that the branches were moving a little bit, the leaves on the branches. So there was something in the tree, and I went ahead and pulled my pistol out, and I took a shot, and it startled the creature. And it started to move, and I immediately just emptied my ammo from my pistol, trying to hit whatever it was. That's what I saw there.
So it looked looking like it was semi-translucent and had yellow glowing eyes.
Yeah, it's that part there is very real, except there's no other actors involved. It's just me alone. You know, those other individuals in the background were not there when I saw it.
Okay.
Okay. I'm by myself. The 506 is back north. All right. So that's kind of what the Khmer Rouge guy looked like, except his head was gone. So I know there's something in the jungle at that point, that I'm not alone. I don't know, you know, apparently when the spacecraft took off, it might have left. He might have been with that spacecraft, and he was just simply left behind. Okay. So he apparently was left behind, and it's just me and him in the jungle. So what happened, James, is, you know, I'm trying to get back to the river. Okay. I really need to try to get back to the river. You know, I'm at this point, I don't have no more ammunition on me. The ammunition I do have is what wouldn't fit my pistol. Okay, it's a different caliber. So I have, you know, that ammo on me. And, you know, when I went on several more miles, and I came upon a bush, it was a cocaine. And I thought, you know, maybe the Khmer Rouge, you know, they were using this, you know, this cocaine. And I was familiar with cocaine because when I was in South America, Manuel Noriega, I've been all down in the jungle, down where his base camp was, and I knew what cocaine was, the leaf was. So I went ahead and picked some of the leaves off the cocaine plant, the shrub, and was going to, you know, put them in a pouch and chew on them to give me some energy, because I really needed to, you know, kind of get out of there, you know. So I went ahead and bedded down again, not far from that shrub. Next morning, you know, I got up and walked back onto the trail, and the bush that was loaded down with the cocaine leaves, there wasn't a leaf on it. So sometime during the night, the creature went to that bush. Of all the bushes in the jungle, he went to that bush. He took every bit of the cocaine leaves off. All right. So not far from the bush, there was you know, the river, and I went into a rock quarry. You know, it was I would imagine the Mekong River, Tony Sapp River, had washed out a slough back there, and there's a pile of rocks, and there's a big tree that fell across a gorge there, and apparently this might have been, I'm thinking it might have been an old base camp for the rebels there.
Can you please why do you think the creature took all the cocaine from the plant?
Well, I'm getting to that, James.
I apologize.
I'm kind of building up. So I get back to where what I believe to be an abandoned rebel camp, and you know, I at this time I already know, you know, another night in the jungle, experiencing all the other bodies that had been mutilated. This guy hunts, and he hunts. He's in the trees, and that's how he hunts. And when I was with that girl, there is what the shaman told me. She's repeating the line of what the shaman said back when I was in Laos. But getting back, James, I need to build a raft, but I don't think I have enough time to build a raft. I mean, this creature is going to come back. And my radio that I had, like I said, it was out of range at that point, being so far away from the original drops point. So what I did, I went ahead and took the ammo and put it in a tree trunk, and sure enough, he came back, and I ended up falling into the slough and slid down into the river. And when I got into the river, I swam up on a bank, and I was covered in mud, getting getting back onto the bank. I just covered up in mud and got up under down by an old down tree, and he had jumped into the river to come after me. And what he had done, I went ahead and got into the trunk of the tree. I'm covered in mud, and when he got up on the bank, he went right by me. He was with maybe as far as from you to your lamp in the background there in your house. He was that close to me, and he could not see me. So what had happened, the mud that I had had smeared on my body, camouflaged had camouflaged me. And I realized that, hey, he can't see me. All right. He walked right by me. Well, at this point, after he left, went ahead and mud it down real good. Because I've mudded down before when I was with the Hmong tribesmen to keep insects off. And I never did use insect repellent when I was in Vietnam, because I was always concerned a tiger would smell me. But on that, when I first went in with the 506 Air Cavalry, they didn't do that. They wore their mosquito repellent. I never did do that. But I went ahead and mudded down, and he couldn't see me at that point. But I went ahead and made a crude arrow, a spear, and took the ammunition and got some leaves and made some little fire bombs, little explosives, like firecrackers, more or less. And but he seemed to hunt off of heat. The helmet he had on, he hunted by body heat. So what I did that night, when the sun went back down, I got up in the tree, and I had taken a torch, had built a bond, had taken some sticks, logs, and you know, threw the torch down and started a bonfire. And I gave a big holler out, a war holler. And so he knew by that point, you know, hey, you know, the fight's on, you know, I'm going to come get you. I'm going to come get you. That scene there is very realistic of what I saw when he came out of the water. The how his suit was acting up from the water. That rodent is. I had that by me. But getting back to that night, once I started the bonfire, I crawled up in a tree, and I'm waiting for him. And next thing I knew, you know, he's in the tree with me. He had a tendency, I don't know how he did it, but he would always try to come up behind me. He crawled right by me again. He could not see me, but I could see him. He was within arm's reach when he climbed up that tree with me. And, you know, of course, you know, I swung around to another tree and, you know, tried to, you know, to shoot at him with a crude weapon, and that just pissed him off. Pissed him off bad. He couldn't see me, but he knew I was in one of the trees.
And
you know,
how tall was he? What would you guys?
8 foot. He was about 8 foot, and I would say a good 400 pounds. You know, I'm going to get to that scene in a minute with the beating that I had to incur. But he had you know, the weapon that you see in the movie. He did have that on his shoulder, and when he started firing it, James, the firepower that was coming out of that weapon, he was taking down trees. I mean, you thought he was shooting a 105 millimeter shell. That thing has as much power as a Sherman tank. Now that's how powerful that weapon was. It would shoot out little balls of light, and it would just, like I said, it was snapping trees left and right. But he hit the tree, eventually hit the tree. You know, if you knock all the trees down in the jungle, well, eventually he's going to hit the right tree. He hit it. He knocked me out of the tree. That's what I saw right there when he went by me, that close. So when he knocked me out of the tree, you know, I fell down into the water, you know, pool of water there, and it washed the mud off of me. And by that point, he could see me. And, you know, like you see in the movie, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he goes up to the tree trunk or the log, and the creature slams the forked knife down. Well, he did the same thing with me. He picked me up. And he just picked me up, put me against a tree, or you know, and he looked me over. He looked me over. But what had happened prior to the beating, I'm going to get back to that. Prior to the beating, I had taken some of that cocaine and chewed it. And it was unusual. This cocaine was very unusual, because the cocaine that I've always took when I was around Manuel Noriega is very addicting. And then you have, like I said, you know, you get withdrawals from the cocaine that Manuel Noriega had. This cocaine had none of those features. This cocaine was like super cocaine. And even after the withdrawal from the cocaine, you don't have any type of drug addiction. So I don't know if that plant had been tampered with, but it seemed to have some unique characteristics to this cocaine. I believe that cocaine is what he was chewing on that gave him the strength that he had. But going back now, when he turned my head, he walked away just like you see in the scene. He drops his weapon off his shoulder and drops his helmet. And that was when he dropped his helmet. That's when I really saw his face. And I just said, you know, you're one ugly motherfucker. You know, I mean, he was ugly, and he stunk. And that's another thing about it. He had a real bad stench to him. He smelled like rotten fish. I presume that's the reptilian in him. But he had an awful stench of that I've smelt. And you see him walking slow. That's what he was doing. And if you look at Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's getting the shit beat out of him, Arnold sounds like a little boy. Well, that's me. I'm just a kid. That's why you hear Arnold Schwarzenegger sound like a little boy, because I'm, like I said, I'm you know, just barely 16 years old. Okay. Now, as far as the log dropping down, what I did, that seems a little bit off there. What I did in that little ravine area that I had set the trap up, what I did, I hacked away at some of the tree there where it was already at about a 45-degree tilt. So I just weakened the tree by taking some of the wood off of the top of the tree, and the log, that's what fell on them there. But that part about where he's spitting up the blood, that's the type of blood I was seeing. It would glow in the dark. He had it when first time I wounded him. When I threw the spear at him back in the cave. So the part about the cave part is very realistic, because he always would come up behind me. He's very hard to hunt. But when he was James, when he was there dying, and this is what really has, I've had over 50 years to think about it. And I said, well, what the fuck are you, And he reached over to the little band on his arm, and, he was typing in to the little band like you would type into, like you text somebody, And it gave out a low tone, and it just repeated back, well, what the fuck are you? And so while he was there dying, he started laughing. He started laughing at me, and that's not a good sign. And the band that he had on, went into some type of a countdown mode, and it, by that point, I'm ready to get out of there. I don't know what's going on with this. Some type of what his armband is getting ready to do. And as I was running away from him, I had some type of an electrical disturbance was going on. And what was happening, it was similar, like I said, to a Tesla coil, except it was more like lightning shooting from the ground up into the sky. And it was similar to a spider web. It was getting larger and larger and larger. And as I was running from him, trying to get down into the other ravine, I could feel these pelting going on my back, similar like you would go out before, or like you're getting ready, you're in a rainstorm, and it's raining real hard, and you feel the raindrops pelting you in your back. All right, so I'm feeling some pelting going on in my back, and then I jumped down into the ravine, and there was just a massive explosion, and I'm below the land area there where the blast couldn't hurt me. But what happened, the blast, and it was more similar to a thermobaric explosion. Now, for people who don't know what a thermobaric detonation is, it's the strongest device that you can pack that's not nuclear. It's a specialized explosion, but it's not electrical. I'm just comparing it to a thermobaric explosion. And when it blew, there was a big mushroom that came up, and this is just right about dawn when it happened. And there was a helicopter, like I said, that was trying to go up down the river. They thought I was out in the river, and when they saw the mushroom cloud that came up, they knew that, hey, there's something going on, here. So that's how, like I said, it opened the jungle up where a helicopter could land. There was no place for a helicopter to land until the bomb went off. So once I got back onto the helicopter, I'm not doing good. I've taken a real bad beating, James. Like I said, when he was beating me, every time he hit me, he would pick my feet up off the ground, and he was just like knocking me around like a rag doll. But once I got back into the helicopter, they're going to fly me back south into.
Jimmy, did the creature actually look like what we saw in the movie with all the little snake thing, the dreadlocks coming out of it, and the?
I would say that's it's very realistic. It is very realistic of what he looked like. Now since then I've killed only one other one. I killed one up in New York in he was underneath an abandoned meat cold storage, a meat factory, where they butcher meat. He had a craft, and don't ask me how he did it. I don't know how they did it, but he had a spacecraft that was underneath an abandoned warehouse. How they did that, I don't know, unless there was underground tunnel or underground base underneath Chicago. But there was one other one I've since killed. I've only killed two in my life, and both of them showed up in the film Predator 1 and Predator 2. Now in Predator 2, he threw a gun at me, and that gun, it was basically an old flintlock. It came off an old smuggling ship called the Black Swan. And if you watch the movie Lost, Dharma, there's a ship called the Black Swan. It's in Lost. Have you ever watched Lost, that sci-fi series? Type in Dharma Initiative. You can find it that way. But let's move on. I don't want to get too off the.
How did a helicopter pick you up if your radio wasn't working?
He saw the explosion.
Okay.
This was similar. it was similar in nature to a thermobaric explosion. He opened up that jungle, and it probably changed the course of the river because it was already in a little slough to begin with. So what happened was the river just changed the course of the river, and it went back into the slough. He opened the slough back up, so the course of the river was changed. And in fact, for a while there, the river flowed north instead of flowing south. I mean, the explosion had a strange, and I'm going to get into that. This is something very unusual. The explosion magnetized me very heavily. I was like a capacitor. Okay, so when I got flown back down into South Vietnam, they brought me to a corpsman, and you know, I'm walking, so it's not like, you know, I don't even think if I remember, I don't even think they had CAT scan machines back then, but I was walking. But I had, when they got me down towards Daylat, my shirt, the explosion, like I said, you know, I didn't have a shirt on. I had these strange welts on my back and on my arms, this welting, and when the corpsman took an IV, you know, I laid my arm out for him to stick the IV into my arm. When he was getting ready to put the IV into me, it was electrical discharge. He got shocked real bad. It's similar like if you have some cheap carpet and you're barefooted and you walk across that carpet and you reach over to touch something. You ever had, you know, like an electrical discharge on your fingers? You feel a pop. You ever had that happen to you? Well, I was electrified, and 2 or 3 times he made an attempt, and after about the 3rd or 4th attempt, he said, "Look, I can't give you an IV." So I ended up having to take the IV that he laid down on the table, and I had to insert my own IV in the arm to get some plasma, because I was, you know, pretty dehydrated. I had taken a horrible beating, James. And so for, you know, I took a bag or two, and you know, I was real sore for a couple of days there, just barely moving. But one of the strange things that occurred when I would get around a radio, the radio they had interference. But if I moved away from the radio would act normal. Now, back then they had old tube fluorescent lamps that were in the ceiling, and I could walk down a hall, and even with the lamps off, there's no power to the fluorescent tubes. When I would walk down the hall, the fluorescent tubes would light up. And it's kind of like a bulb, you know, like, you know, you got a bulb going out in a fluorescent lamp. It flickers, you know. Well, the electrical bulbs in the ceiling of the building would blink. So I was heavily magnetized. If you had taken a compass and put in front of me, and I moved my hand around the compass, I could make the compass spin. So, you know, after a couple of days, a week or so, you know, I'm feeling a little better. I'm still sore, and I got up, and, you know, hey, you know, I'm ready to get something to eat. You know, I'm going to go ahead and try to go back to work. And I went down to the nuclear power plant. I'll never forget this. The scientists all got scared, the physicists, and they bolted the door to the nuclear power plant, and they wouldn't let me in. They were scared because I was magnetized or had been magnetized, and they wouldn't let me in to go get any food. So, I'm in daylight, and I've had a terrible beating, and here are the scientists and the physicists and everything, and they're scared to let me in a nuclear power plant to get something to eat. So, I went back to the container unit. We had all the radio equipment in, and ate C rations, and eventually got to feeling better. But the only way how I got demagnetized, somebody had taken a rag that had some diesel on it, and I had picked the rag up to wipe my hands off, and when I wiped my hands off, the hairs on my arms started to lay down. And when you're magnetized, your hair stands up on your arm, it stands up on your head. I ended up having to take a diesel rag and wipe my body completely down from head to toe. Even my pubic hairs. I had to take all that and wipe down in diesel, and that was the only thing that demagnetized me.
Jimmy, can you please explain why you had to go to the nuclear power plant to get food?
Well, the other guy, when there wasn't a whole lot down there, and the food was much better, I just kind of followed him in there. He knew that the scientists, the physicists, they got some pretty good meals. He was just, like I said, he was freeloading off of them, you know what I mean? Just being like a neighbor, like, their facility was down the street from us, and there wasn't really a whole lot on that street. And, I could have gone down to the mess hall, but like I said, he was eating pretty good, so I just followed him in. But, like I said, when I scared the physicists so bad, once they piled the furniture up to the door, they would say, "GI, go home, GI, go home, GI." They were terrified of me because they had never seen anything like it. They didn't know if anything would malfunction in a nuclear power plant, for that matter. So when I look back at it, I really don't blame them for what they did. But there is no area. There is no Project Blue Book. All there is the nuclear power plant, and all of our people that really did know, that really were in the know, was back in the States around Nellis Air Force Base, Holloman Air Force Base. Those are where the Area 51 folks all hang out, you see. The only other person I knew in Vietnam that were Area 51 was, you had David Corso. Him and Duncan O'Finlan's been back in Cambodia, but I don't think, like I said, when I was with Duncan, we use our psychic abilities, and we sent out an electrical pulse. Me and the other kids did. We joined hands and sent out a pulse from that killed 6,000 or 7,000 of the Viet Cong. But that metal band that we put on our heads, it went to a box that came off the spacecraft, and it was basically a telepathic weapon. We could operate this. Only thing Duncan was, he would aim it, but it was basically a box that came off of a flying saucer. It was a telepathic weapon, is what it was. Okay, so other than for Duncan and David Corso, the only other person I knew over there was Bill Cooper. Now, Bill, he was the old patrol boat captain, but I don't think he was in that part of Vietnam. I think he was probably further north towards Saigon. So he wasn't even in that canal system or that river system where I was at. This was just I was just closest to where this plane went down. Okay, that's all I can explain. But as far as Project Blue Book, Vietnam did not have a Project Blue Book. What it was basically private contractors that serviced the radar systems. They came from Area 51 that set a container up. And Vietnam, as far as the flying saucers attacking the PT boats and then attacking the Australian Hobart, nobody didn't think that the Vietnam War would drag on that long, and they weren't prepared for that. But wars attract these creatures. They feed on negative energy, and that's what I found out. They use the jungle. They like wars. That's what, if you die a violent death, they feed on a negative energy. And that's why I say about the temples, you shouldn't try to channel, because they will attempt to, they want you to think that you're talking to another human. And so you shouldn't try to channel stone statues. There's a reason that there are stone statues. There's a reason you see all those strange pictures on the Great Pyramids of Egypt. These are genetically modified creatures,